Hello, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. I am your host and only host for tonight, Ron Luce. A little solo mission, and this one feels appropriate at the right time because I just get to vent this entire episode. You want to vent with me? Drop in the comment section, as always, and we'll get to them as we can. But first off, happy Sunday, everybody. Unfortunately, the Cubs are coming off a series loss to the Cincinnati Reds, and that is where we're going to get things started. Paint the town red, or in this case, Reds, as the Cincinnati Reds come into Wrigley Field, take 2 out of 3. It all started on Friday, was in attendance on Friday, got this sweet giveaway on Friday as well. Everybody knows here that I like tank tops, so these are phenomenal. Big fan of these. They did a great job on these, truly. They're very comfortable. They're nicely made. But it was a great day to be at the ballpark. It was beautiful, 120 start, as always. Great start to the week, or in this case, the weekend, I should say, being in the bleachers. But unfortunately, a day late and a dollar short for the Cubbies on Friday. That game, frustrating, to say the very least. Javier Assad got the start, pitched overall really well. Just the 2 earned runs from him. 7 Ks, the walks, a little high again, 3 this time when it's all said and done, but 5 1/3 from Mr. Assad in Friday's game. Saturday, then, the Cubs get a win. A 3-hour rain delay game was supposed to start at 6:15. They played at 9:30 because it was a national broadcast. Cubs get a big win, 7-5 homers from Seiya Suzuki, his being the first career grand slam of his, and then Dansby with a big clutch bomb late in the game to give the Cubbies the lead. Neris closes that one down. Leiter Jr. is technically your winning pitcher when it's all said and done. Justin Steele fought the rain, the mess, the mud, perhaps you could say. Everything was soaked and still pitched a strong 5. Only 1 earned run given up technically because of the error, even though 5 were against Justin. But the error accounted for 4 of those. And then today's game, probably the most frustrating. Ben Brown on the bump looked really strong early on, but top of the second, Reds get on the board, bases loaded. Jonathan India, sac fly, gets the first run home, and then a 3-run shot from Friedel. Reds tacked on in the third to get their 5th run. That's all they would need. Cubs got 2 back, but it didn't matter when it's all said and done. So again, as we noted, the Cubs lose 2 of 3. My dad asks, "Where is mine?" I don't have one. You'll have to sit in the bleachers, Dad, if you want to get one of these. My dad doesn't want to sit in the bleachers with me. It's tragic. It's tragic. But let's dive into some of the overarching points of today's episode, because this one's not so much about what happened in the series. I think it's very, very clear what happened in the series. I think it's very, very clear how this team feels. I think it's getting hard. A lot of fans are frustrated, and month of May was brutal. They finished 10-18, the exact same record as a season ago, and yet they're unable to get the job done, and off to a rough start in June already. 1-2, or technically 1-1 now in the month of June. It's been bad. It's been bad. The bats are not doing anything, as my dad says here. No hit, no runs. No runs. Yeah, they haven't been able to put together these big offensive performances. The fun note of this, well, maybe not so fun note of this, the Cincinnati Reds scored 5 runs in every single one of these games. 2 of the 3, it was enough to win the ball game. So you're already starting to see the Cubs don't need to be out there putting up 7 and 8 runs per game, especially with the starting pitching being as good as it's been most of this season. It, at this point, is simply about just getting enough runs. This team, it feels like a miracle for this team to score 4 runs right now. I think that's where a lot of the frustration lies. So this is the first question that we're going to open up with this series, and I guess topic we'll call it here, because my dad's saying, let's do something, Jed. And this is kind of where I ask, because I actually had this teed up for the show with Juice on Thursday when we finished off that Brewers series. But is it time to panic? And maybe this is a premature question, but is it time to panic? Is there questions to be had is what is going to happen with this team right now, because something's got to get done. Something needs to get done, and largely getting the comments saying, no, no, not time to panic yet. No, but things need to change. And that's exactly where I wanted to go with this. So I would agree with you. I don't think it's time to panic yet. We just finished May. There's a lot of baseball left. This Cubs team was largely in a very similar position at this time last year. Unfortunately, I think what's frustrating to so many people, myself included, the Cubs on Tap guys, as we've talked about it away from the microphones, it feels like a little bit of insanity, because this is largely the same team from a year ago, minus a couple of minor additions. Michael Bush at first base instead of the Trey Mancini and Eric Hosmer experience. You know, you get the addition of a PCA coming up and providing a little more in center field up from night to night. Mike Talkman has continued to be an important part of this team, but it's a lot of the same, if not worse. You know, they lost Bellinger last year for a month, and it feels like they've largely lost most of this team for this month, because the guys that are healthy aren't hitting, and the guys that were doing well get hurt. And that's kind of where everything stands. There's so many questions to be had. Like, I think about the starting rotation, and I want to bring a question here, or a comment up from Matthew. He says Brown needs to be the closer, bring up Horton. Unfortunately, Horton's hurt. He's being evaluated in Chicago. Like, that's where we stand right now. That is where we stand. Is guys are getting hurt, and I think this farm system that so many people were chiming was ready, right, to help this team succeed. It's not, and I've largely been again. I always love to say it, right? A player is a prospect. They're a prospect's a prospect until they're not a prospect anymore. That's kind of what it is, right? Like, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, is this going to be, the Matt Shaw year? Or is this going to be this guy's year?" Truthfully, right now, the only new prospect I think that has a chance of coming up and making an impact, because they've had a strong season, because they've been able to stay healthy, and they're doing it at the AAA level, is Owen Casey. I know a lot of people laughed at me about that early in the season when I said I think we see him this year. I still think we do. I think it's going to get to a point where they say we need somebody that can come up and try to hit. He's hitting 290 as a 21-year-old in AAA. I mean, this guy has raked every single level that he's been at, and I think he's the one that has the chance. And I know I see Matthew here in the comments saying Shaw, but Shaw's been cold this year. He's finally starting to turn it around. It's funny, we talk shit about him here at Cubs on Tap, and things happen. He's got 2 home runs to bookend the weekend, which is a great start for him. I would love to see him this year if he's truly ready. And I think he escalated so quickly last year in such limited time that I don't foresee him getting a shot unless it's absolutely necessary. Think back to like when Nico Horner made his debut, right? That was a pure out of necessity. He was the only shortstop that in the system was healthy. Russell was hurt at the time. Baez was hurt at the time. They had to make a move, and they ultimately did, and that's what ended up being the case. So there's going to be a lot to see. And, my dad says here, trade Hap, put Owen in left. Hap's been one of the best players for this team. That's the crazy part about all of it right now. You go ahead and look at this lineup today, and I scroll through. Hap is one of the few guys that's got above a 700 OPS. Make the argument right now that guys that need to sit might be more somebody like Dansby Swanson. Ian Happ has been really good lately, but it's frustrating because it's not enough, right? Like, this team feels like it's missing one back. This team feels like it's missing one relief pitcher, and they got terrible news with the relief pitching now over the weekend, right? No Julian Merriweather till after the All-Star break. Alzolay just got put on the 60-day IL, so he's probably out till after All-Star break. And then you're probably looking at, realistically, Yency Almonte is probably not going to throw much before the All-Star break either, because he just started throwing off a flat ground. So 3 of your highest leverage arms in this bullpen right now are not even going to be available to you potentially until after the All-Star break. That's a month and a half of baseball that this Cubs team needs to dig deep and kind of figure it the fuck out. And it's going to be something that needs to be kept in mind. I do want to give love to the comment section. I know I've gone on a little bit of a rant here. We're going to pick up with that rant again. But going back to a little bit earlier, Jeremiah said, breaking news. He himself will be at Wrigley Field on June 15th. You know what's funny, Jeremiah? I will also be there on June 15th. So we will have to organize something and say hello. But I will be there as well for that game. As things stand coming through here, like my dad said a little bit earlier, the big bats went to sleep. Yeah, 100% well put. Good evening, Mr. Stolet Breezing. How are you, sir? Darren says, the time to panic is not at the moment, but you can see it from here. I kind of like that. I think that puts it into perspective, right? Hey, it's not quite time to panic yet, but like if the same shit continues to persist, like we can see it's like the train, right? When you're on top of the train and it's the old Western movie and they're fighting the bad guy and you turn around and you can see the like opening where it just covers the train, right? And you got to duck or you're going to get squished. That's kind of what it feels like, right? Like they can see it. It's like, oh shit, we got to do something here really quick to get this thing kind of figured out. Morris with a great question. First off, hello, Morris. One of our lovely, if you guys are big Bulls fans, by the way, big shout out to Morris. Go check out his work here at On Tap Sportsnet. But he asks, what is an ideal roster addition, pardon me, Jed should pull off to turn the season around? And that's a loaded question because it's funny. Early in the season, we probably would have, the resounding answer probably would have been a bullpen arm, right? Like, oh, go get another bullpen arm, go get a Mason Miller, which a lot of people are still chiming for. Go get an Emmanuel Clase, go get somebody like that. Now it feels like let's go get a bat. The only problem is there's so few teams that are out of it that have impact bats that are available. A lot of people are like, well, what about the Toronto Blue Jays? Toronto Blue Jays are largely still in the chase. Hell, I'd make the argument the Toronto Blue Jays are in just about the same position as the Cubs are in terms of record. And, their difference is they're in a tough division because the AL East is the AL East. So you would like to say, that you could potentially go get like a Vladimir Guerrero Jr., maybe a Bo Bichette, who could move over and play third, and you can DH Morel a little bit more. Maybe that allows him to get healthy, even though he really hasn't been a huge issue defensively at third base. There's a lot to it. I think right now, just because of what's available, Morris, it feels like Pete Alonso, right? I think that's the one because the Mets are, 10, 11 games below 500 right now. They're probably not turning it around, and he's on an expiring contract. To me, that's the type of move. I wouldn't say it necessarily needs to be Pete Alonso, but it needs to be an impact bat. It needs to be a guy that's going to deliver slug because that's the one thing this lineup cannot do on a daily basis right now is slug. Your top slugging guys like Bellinger, Suzuki, say I'm starting to slug a little more now. It feels like he's finally starting to get healthy, right? You saw the home run in the Milwaukee series. He hits a home run in this Red series. He's a guy that if he continues to warm up, that's big. Because we saw it early in the season. Say I was performing at MVP-like numbers before the injury, and it kind of made this lineup go. But I think right now, it really, you look at Morel's not slugging, even though he's the unluckiest player in baseball. Look at his BABIP numbers. It's the stupidest thing that exists on this earth. He's like second to last in actual batting average compared to expected batting average. It's ridiculous. But then you go from there. I'm looking at the lineup right now from today. Bellinger's starting to slug a little bit. He had a hell of a day today. He was 3 for 4 with an RBI. At least somebody was good. Talkman continues to be good. Wisdom is crashing down to earth. I think, I think it's got to be a slug guy. It has to be a slug guy right now. Is really the ideal roster addition, I think. Somebody that's going to come in and provide huge slug for this offense. Because you start getting these guys, right? That's been their biggest struggle. They get 2 and 3 guys on, and then they can't bring anybody home. Get 2 and 3 guys on and have that guy that can slug and put one into the gap or put one into the bleachers. That goes a long way. So that's kind of where I think it lies. See where things are. Stolet here says 3 things to start out. He says Morel needs to be moved down the lineup. Your cleanup man can bat fourth. I think it's saying that he's just not a good cleanup man right now based on what's going on. He says PCA needs to lead off. Your spark plug guy can't be batting 8th in front of an automatic out at catcher. I don't hate that idea. I think that would be super interesting to experiment with. I think that's one of the biggest things here is what the hell are they going to do to change something? It feels like every single day they trot out a similar lineup. Corner gets moved into the leadoff spot today, but that's only because they faced a lefty and Lodolo. You know, the wisdom experiment's getting old. I think the PCA bit at the top of the lineup's an interesting thought, and maybe you give him some more pitches to hit because people don't want him on base to, steal second, steal third, and then do something crazy to get the home plate. I don't hate that idea still. I think that's a fascinating, fascinating case study. I'm going to star that one for my own sake, sir. I think that's interesting. I appreciate that thought. Matthew says can't trade anyone in the majors. I tend to agree, unless you're making a humongous upgrade, and that would be like a Juan Soto level addition. And the Yankees are in first place, so that's not happening. But it says get a first baseman and then trade with Miami or Oakland. That would be ideal, right? I mean, but even like Miami and Oakland right now just aren't selling anybody. And that's largely because it's just so early and nobody's willing to pay what the price was for Luis Arias. The Padres gave up quite a bit to get Arias. It's, that's something that they'll have to keep an eye on as well. Stoll adds, Bush needs to be back in the lineup, give Tauchman and PCA some days off. You need that power. Bush is playing well again. He is playing well again. And I look at his numbers just tilting over to here. He still has a 784 OPS. I know that batting average is hovering right around like 240 right now. He's hitting 241, but he gets on base. He does take his walks. He slugs, which, right, we were just talking about what do they need in this lineup. They need guys that can slug. I'm really for the idea of just kind of hitting the shuffle button. And anybody that'll appreciate this at home, you guys can probably see, I realize I'm not going the right direction, so bear with me. But you guys see the thing here, right? Marion Hossa banner. We finally decorated behind me for also, which is great. It's like the old Blackhawks days, right? When Joel Quenneville was coach, they would hit the line blender, and he would change the lineup crazy if they lost like 2 in a row. And it would kind of spark plug guys. It would force guys to communicate. I wonder if something like that for the lineup could be incredible right now, because Craig has stuck with a very similar lineup day in and day out. Maybe it is time to give these guys a new look. Give some guys a chance to hit in different spots. Maybe Seiya Suzuki gets moved down to the 4 hole, right? I think Bellinger stays in the 3. I think he's the 1 guy. But then maybe you put a Nico Horner in the 2 hole. Maybe you put PCA as the leadoff man. Maybe you let Tauchman hit in like a 6 spot. And maybe he starts to drive in some runs because he's been consistent and he has good at-bats. There's a lot of what-ifs, right, with this team. A lot of what-ifs. And that'll be something that they need to keep an eye on moving forward as well. The only tradable outfielder they have is Mike Tauchman. Yeah, probably right now. And truthfully, I don't think they're going to trade Tauchman. I think they like Tauchman, and understandably so. Darren says this team was built with the core needing to be on their A game from the start and needed pieces added in a hard spot with the core's erratic play to date. Well put. I agree. It has largely been the core that has struggled, right? It's been the Seiya Suzuki's, it's been the Ian Happs, it's been the Christopher Morels, I guess. I don't know if I would necessarily consider Morel a core player quite yet, just because he's so young. I think he is, but agree, right? Dansby, your big guns, the guys making big money are largely what makes up that core. And that's been something indeed. Stoll says the Cubs can't hit lefties. 36 innings, 3 earned runs. This belly and all righties isn't working. I agree, especially when it features guys like Patrick Wisdom. Today featured David Bodie, which wasn't terrible. He did drive in a run technically today, so welcome back to him, and we'll touch on that here in a little bit of time. Jeremiah says this feels like the 2009 Cubs without the slug. The 2019 Cubs, not the 2009 Cubs. I can't read. It's been a long day. I don't know if it's quite gotten there just yet. That 2019 skid was bad. Like, that whole team was bad. Like, even the starting pitching fell apart, right? I don't know if a lot of people remember, but like Cole Hamels and John Lester became shells of themselves down the stretch. And that was, 2 of your guys that you were heavily relying on every 5 days when you went through the rotation, and they just fell apart and couldn't pitch anymore. So I don't know if we're that bad yet. Stoll says Bush Milwaukee series hit 375 with a 575 on base, and then he gets benched this weekend. Counts on 2 or 3 opportunities to pinch hit Bush for a mile with runners in scoring position and didn't do it. Yeah. And again, I think that continues to bring light right to what's going on with, but just with everything in terms of the catching position. There's no offense coming from the catching position right now. And, you said it really is kind of just an automatic out right now, given the way things are. Matthew says trade PCA. They have Talkman and Bellinger. He's not the player they need. Get Alonso. I don't think you need to give PCA to get Pete Alonso. I think that ship has long sailed, especially because Alonso he's a Boris client. He's going to go to free agency no matter what. Even if he does come back to the Cubs, it's going to at least require him listening on some other teams. I don't think they need to trade PCA yet. In fact, PCA has been really good. I don't think they need to trade him just yet. If I'm trading PCA, I'm trading PCA to go get Juan Soto. I'm not trading PCA to get a washed up. He's not washed up, but an older first baseman. If I'm trading Pete, it's for a franchise player that's going to be here for a long time. So I don't know if it's quite ready for that yet. So the council puts Bush to lead off down 3 runs. Yeah, that's never great. That was a finishing of his thought. And he says, Wisdom is done. Can't square anything up. Nothing hit hard for weeks. And that was in response to Start Wisdom and Bodie with a laughing face from my dad. Bodie, I think, was fine today. First game back at the big leagues. I think you're going to see Bodie a lot more. But it's, it's one of those things where, well, we'll just have to wait and see how it portrays. But there's a lot that needs to be addressed. And I would personally like to start seeing something happen sooner than later. And I don't even necessarily think it needs to be a trade. Just going back to kind of what Stolet brought up with shaking up the lineup, just something of that nature, something to wake guys up, to make guys start producing, maybe just get a different look. Maybe Seiya Suzuki gets more pitches to hit in the 4-hole, especially if he's got a really solid guy hitting in the 5-hole behind him. I mean, Ian Happ has largely been really solid in that 5-hole since he's been in that spot, actually. I think that's been huge. It's just, there's a lot of what ifs, and it doesn't look like there's a lot of answers from within the organization. And I think that's what is frustrating people is, so what do you do, right? A lot of teams don't like to trade this early in the year just because you're probably paying a premium because you don't know if you're totally out of it. I mean, nobody's out of it at this point in the season. I mean, even the worst teams in baseball aren't totally out of it. And it's going to be something interesting to see here. This is a good topic that I do want to discuss here for a brief moment that was brought up in the comment section. So it's a DFA Willie Harris. Jeremiah follows it up and says, one bad send isn't enough to fire the guy. I think what people didn't see, I don't think it was a bad send. I just think he had the wrong player on. And I think that's a big reason why Madrigal got demoted, because he's not that good of a base runner. This guy is supposed to be this, like, he gets on base, he smacks the hits, he can run. Like, he doesn't really run that well. And, I think what, you could say, well, if they got conservative. Baseball is such a difficult game. This is every game, right? Everybody talks about, well, that one play made the difference. Well, you can technically point to 3 or 4 plays before that could have made the same difference. For example, if Hector Neris doesn't give up that 5th run in the top of the 9th, they're not sending Madrigal there because you're not trying to tie the game. In that instance, your first runner scores, you tie the game at 4, and then you give Belly a chance with a free out to try and get a sac fly and play, and that probably would have happened. So I don't hate Willie being aggressive there. I really don't. I think that wasn't the worst move in the world because you're down. You need to be aggressive. It just Madrigal sucks at base running, and that was a great throw by Ellie De La Cruz. Like, I know it's hard to see on the broadcast. That was a absolute piss missile off his right arm. Like, if that's any other shortstop in baseball, Madrigal has a chance at the plate. Juice and I were talking about this because Juice was at the game with me on Friday as well. And he said the same thing when we were talking about it after the fact. He said, if that's any other shortstop, like, Madrigal at least has a chance at the plate. But Ellie De La Cruz throws, 105? I mean, that thing got on the catcher quick, and he had all the time in the world to make the play on Madrigal at the plate. I think the one thing I was more upset with Willie Harris about was when Dansby got picked off at 3rd. Because what people might not see is that Dansby rounded 3rd because he couldn't see the play behind him. He didn't realize PCA was going to beat out that infield single, and India came up, thought about throwing to one, and then when he saw Dansby round, he threw it to third. If Willie's there and says, "Hey, just stay," like stay, don't leave the plate, like don't leave the bag, because then maybe India picks it up, maybe tries to throw it away, and then you can send Dansby, say, "Go, go, go," because the ball gets away because he tries to make a play on PCA. That's that base running, right? That Stoll brought up a little bit earlier with that spark plug type player that PCA is. I think that's what has frustrated me the most about that game on Friday. I don't hate the send. It was also a great throw. I think it wasn't even Friedel. I can't even pronounce the guy's name that was in left field, but he made a great throw as well on that play. I mean, it's a good play. It's a good play. Stole's got some numbers for us. He says, thrown out home plate since 2021, Harris third base coach. 2021, 19, that was third most in baseball. 2022, 24, that was the most in baseball. 2023, 21, most in baseball. And so far in 2024, 11, the most in baseball. Yeah, unfortunately, too, I think, though, some of it is just these Cubs players also aren't great base runners, right? I mean, how many guys could we really call great base runners on this team? A few. Bush is a really good base runner. PCA is obviously a great base runner. Nico, there's not a lot of great base runners on this team, and I think that's just a product of the thing. But numbers are numbers. I think that's an interesting piece of information brought to the light here. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. Darren says, if we trade for a power bat, he says he'd rather overpay a bit for one with control than to pick up a few rentals that maybe don't work out and lose 3 or 4 prospects for the future. I totally agree. And then this is why I'm saying, like, with the kind of going back to that trade PCA note, the only reason I would trade PCA is for a guy with control. And yes, Darren, thank you. He says Talkman is a smart base runner. Talkman's a very good base runner. But I think that's where most of the frustration lies in terms of making a trade, Darren, is there's not a lot of guys available that have control. And that's the hardest part. Vlad Guerrero Jr. would be a guy with control if they do decide to move him, but it's only 1 year of control. And he's an ARB4 Super 2 guy, which means he's probably still getting a $21 million bag. So that's something you got to be thinking about as well. I don't think money right now is the issue for this Cubs team. Maybe it's just how they've used that money, because you look at the guys they have paid highly that they expect to be a part of this core, and those are the ones that are struggling right now, as largely mentioned throughout the comments as well as on this live stream. There's a lot of like, hey, if this guy started doing this or this guy starts doing that, the team looks different. Unfortunately for this team right now, that's just how things are going right now, and it's been rough. It's been real rough. Got to get a sip there. This is the pain go away juice when the Cubs lose a series. Another comment here from Ricky De Hoyos. He says, I'm still dumbfounded how the team is playing right now. They have had shitty luck in all aspects of the game. They have. And I'm glad you brought that up. That I'm actually going to mark down here. I'm glad you brought that up, because we actually had this discussion amongst the Cubs on Tap crew. Because we talk, throughout the day. Baseball thoughts come up, it gets thrown into our group message. We were talking about how unlucky have the Cubs been. And so we got on the topic of BABIP. For those that don't know what BABIP is batting average on balls in play. So it's just saying, hey, you're hitting the ball, you're putting the ball in play. What is your batting average? And although not perfect, it does give a good sense of luck and how it does help certain teams more than others. A great example of that, the number 1 team in baseball right now in BABIP, the Milwaukee Brewers. And you saw it a lot, especially in Thursday's game. And Juice and I talked about that on the show following the game. The Cubs are 25th in baseball in BABIP. So part of that is, right, if you're just rolling over ground balls, sure, you're getting outs. It shows that there's no slug going on. But there's also some luck that factors into that too, right? Because you look at what like Christopher Morel's doing. He's firing cannons off the bat, but they're just right at people. There's some bad luck involved there. So I am also dumbfounded, because they've had some really shitty luck. They really have. And they need some things to start going right. And water does find its level. water does find its level. But it's going to be something that they really need to dive into and just hope that the baseball gods are like, hey, you've gone through it these first 2 months. We're going to help you out here a little bit. And hopefully they can get things going. I think they're going to be aggressive. I think Jed's going to be aggressive at the deadline. I think he's going to be aggressive in the offseason. I think he has to. I don't think he has a choice. I think we're starting to get to the point now where it's no longer like, hey, we still have good attendance and the team is painfully average. Because eventually that's going to catch up with people. That's going to catch up with the Ricketts. And they'll start to feel that. And I think Tom knows that. Because everybody's like, well, they're making a ton of money. They were making way more money in 2016 and 2017 and 2015 when this team was good and this team was humming and this team was fun. And I can tell you right now, they want to get back to that. So Jed's going to have to be aggressive. I think Jed needs to get aggressive partially for his job too. I think the seat's not hot by any means, but I think before the season's over, the seat warmers are going to get turned on, at least on the lowest setting, because he said, he's like, we got this plan. We're going to follow this plan. And so far that plan is resulting in a lot of bad luck and being a couple games below 500, at the start of June. They're going to have to figure things out. But great point, Ricky, there. I am going to get past some of the ranting now and just talk a little bit quickly here about David Bodie. David Bodie's back, made the start today at third base. He was 0 for 3, but he did have an RBI. I think this is just like the epitome of like, oh, it's cool to see him back because he was such a big part of some of those late golden era teams, right? Like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 before he was eventually sent down. Stuck with the organization, has been nothing but strong in AAA Iowa for the organization. Probably been great for a lot of the young guys down there having a big leaguer like him with the amount of experience he has. And he gets rewarded by getting another chance. And this is a big year for Bodie. I think this is the biggest reason why I wanted to bring this to light. This is a big year for Bodie because Bodie signed that crazy long-term contract for next to no money in the grand scheme of it all. But this is the last guaranteed season of that contract. It was a 7-year deal, but only 5 of the years were fully guaranteed years. The next 2 years are options, club options specifically. So realistically, this is Bodie's last chance with the organization. If he can't figure it out, because he would be making $7 million next year. I think right now he's only making 3. So that's why they can stomach him being in the minors and it's not a big deal. He's largely down to his last chance. And it's, $7 million for reference, Justin Steele, because of arbitration, is making $4 million this year. So for $7 million for a guy who just got back to the big leagues, this is really the year now that Bodie needs to prove it. He needs to have a good stint with this team again now here in 2024. Otherwise, he's probably not in this organization following next year. And but good to see David Bodie back. I think it was cool seeing him back. Everybody remembers the walk-off against the Nationals. Obviously, that was such a great moment. And we'll continue to see what happens with Bodie. But this is a big year for Bodie. There's going to be a lot of questions to ask here because, again, 2 club options over the next 2 years at like $7 million. Cubs are not going to pick that up if he's not going to be a part of the future. I saw the comment section start to fly and put some more things together here. Jeremiah said the boat goat. And it looks like there's a couple more things here. Bodie's a class act. Yeah, he strikes me as just that like clubhouse guy that's just good to have, and you'll love to see things like that. And Jeremiah says, love that Bodie was just chilling in the minors and making bank. He was, and I joked with this with some of the other guys on Cubs on Tap here. Bodie making like $3 million in Des Moines as a AAA player is like making like $15 million in the city of Chicago. Like he was making bank to be a minor league ball player, but good for him. I mean, he earned it, right? They wanted to sign him to that deal, and he got guaranteed money. That's the dream. Everybody wants that baseball contract because they're fully guaranteed outside of options and things like that. Again, why it's a big year for David Bodie. This is realistically his last year unless he can prove that he's worth the $7 million for 2 club options over the next 2 years. So it's going to be something to keep an eye on there. Stoltz says, anything about the free agent signing of infielder Axel Mancebo? I know nothing about Axel, admittedly, but I will do my research and I will hopefully learn some more about the guy because I don't know anything about him, admittedly. So we'll have to dive in there. Finally, my last topic here before we do look ahead and put this series behind us. Where to go from here? Well, you have to hope that the pitching continues to do great things because the starters have been phenomenal. As my dad says here, good starting pitching. The bats will wake up. They need to add a bat and pick up some bullpen help ASAP. I absolutely agree. I think that's ultimately the plan moving forward. But they need some of these guys to start to turn it around a little bit. Water always finds its level. Jude said it on the show the other day, and I think it was a great takeaway. You're never as bad as bad as it gets, but you're never as good as when it's good. Like you're always going to be in the middle. Baseball is a humbling sport on that, and I think they're going to continue to find some things. The starting pitching has hummed all season long. They're going to figure it out. One bullpen arm. Hopefully, you get some of these guys back and healthy after the All-Star break, right? Yancy Almonte would be a huge return. Julian Merriweather is going to be a huge return. Might see Caleb Killian back after the All-Star break. Maybe he comes up and gets a chance in the bullpen if he's healthy enough. He's a bigger maybe just because he's missed so much time this year. But it would be really cool to see some of these guys step up, and then some of these other guys that are hurt right now get healthy, because that would certainly go a long way. Jeremiah says 100% not joking. We should bring back Esteban Quiros to supplement the offense. I don't even know where Esteban Quiros is, but that is a name drop, and that's a fun name drop at that. So, but that's where we go from here. And where we go from here is on to the next series, because next up is the Chicago White Sox, probably the most dreaded series of the season, just from the standpoint of the annoying shit that comes up with it, because God forbid the White Sox win one of these games, their World Series, and their fans are just going to rub it in the face of Cubs fans because they hate the Cubs more than they hate their own team, and more than they ever could love their own team as well. So it'll be something to keep an eye on. Stoltz says here, you look at the June schedule, see a lot of winnable games, take care of business, go on a run. Should be close to challenging Milwaukee at the end of the month. I agree. And I'm going to return to this comment here in a second. I want to get to Stoltz's other one here. He says, no Chicago White Sox player has been intentionally walked so far this season in 60 games. It's the longest such streak since they started keeping intentional walks as a stat back in 1955. That's a hell of a stat. He says, Cubs must sweep this 2-game set this week. I completely agree. And I do want to go back to the schedule here, because with the White Sox being the next team up, this is a very realistic month where they can have a good month of baseball. Like, this is the month where you can turn things around, truly. Because you look at the schedule, and I'm glad you brought that up because I have it up, as a matter of fact. You look at the schedule, you finished up with the Reds. Now you got 2 against the White Sox here at Wrigley. And then you're away from Wrigley Field for about a week and some change. 4 with the Reds, an off day, 3 with the Tampa Bay Rays, who are largely struggling this year by their standards. Then you come home for 3 with the Cardinals over the weekend. I believe that's Father's Day weekend. And then you got 3 with the Giants at home before you get an off day, 3 with the Mets at home. And then you go on the road for 4 with the Giants before finishing out the month with 3 against the Brewers, as Stolet mentioned here. They should have a chance because the Giants have been playing okay ball. They're number 2 in the NL West, but they're a game above 500. They're very similar to that Padres team that the Cubs should have largely beaten in both of those series, not just in the one at Wrigley. The Cardinals, they just were hot at the right time. They're probably going to come crashing down to earth at some point. And you're at home. You got to take care of your rival. The Reds, they need to figure it out with the Reds. I know the Reds have always been a thorn in the Cubs' side, but they need to take care of business there. Tampa, same thing, a team that's not playing so great. And the Mets are just atrocious. That should be the easiest series of this month for the Cubs because the Mets are just that bad. So we'll have to wait and see. It's going to be a lot of winnable games. I agree. Just like Stolen said, it's going to be winnable, but they need to take care of business. Now is the time to turn on the Jets. And again, even if you're humming into the All-Star break a few games above 500 in this division right now, that's going to be enough to keep you competitive where you're adding at the deadline and you're going for it this year rather than, wondering what the hell is going to happen and go from there. Ricky De Hoyo says Esteban Quiroz went to another club, but he forgot which one. He did. I don't remember either. I couldn't even tell if he's in the majors anymore. He might be playing in another league somewhere. And Jeremiah says here, never forget Andrew Romine's homer versus newly traded Craig Kimbrell. Fun fact about that, I was at that game with the Romine homer. So I distinctly remember watching the face of White Sox fans because they were in a playoff race. I think the White Sox ended up winning the game anyway in extras, but to see Romine hit that off of Kimbrell after the big trade was so sweet, to say the least. But I do technically have tickets for Tuesday's game. There's a chance I don't go. So that's what's coming up here. But I agree. You got your two strong pitchers on the bump this week. It looks like it's going to be Shota and then Tyone for these two games. Just go out there and take care of business. The White Sox are bad. This is a team where you should beat them. You're in your own ballpark on top of it. You have two of your better starters going in this series. Just take care of business. Get a couple hits, put some things together. They're not really throwing any of their best starters by any stretch of imagination right now. The way it's lining up, it's going to be Chris Flexen and his 5.50 ERA on Tuesday. It's going to be Eric Fetty, who's largely been good for them this year. But he's got a 3.12 ERA. He's going to throw on Wednesday. So beat him up and see what happens. And they'll have to go from there. You got to beat the White Sox. This is just a team you got to beat. Take that positive momentum into Cincinnati starting on Thursday and give some payback to the Reds after what they did here this weekend in Wrigley Field. It's absolutely going to be necessary. Jeremiah asks, Fetty Wap? No, not Fetty Wap. Eric Fetty. That's KBO MVP Eric Fetty, who will not be a White Sox after the trade deadline. I bet you he gets traded because of that second year of control. Excuse me. So before we finish things out, I will address this one last comment here from Jay. I didn't forget about you, Jay. I saw it a little bit earlier. Well, he says, what day is the walk along this week? He asks Tuesday or Wednesday. It might not even be either day. We're still kind of sorting that out with the Monday off day for the Cubs. You won't hear from us, obviously. You might hear from the Dingers boys. I haven't checked with them about their schedule. So I really, 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 really hope that they can, that the Dinger boys can record. Love hearing those guys and encourage you guys to go check them out as well here on the YouTube. Like, subscribe, hit the bell button. You know the drill. But we might have a watch along on Tuesday night. We'll definitely have a show on Wednesday following the 2-game set is the game plan right now, but there might be a watch along for Thursday's game with the Reds. That's what we're potentially looking at right now as well, which would be kind of fun. That might be the 99999 night if my stomach is able to be ready for such a thing. A couple final comments here before we wrap this thing up. Stoic says best Cubs player walk-up music. He says Talkman's walk-up with a question mark. Talkman's got a good one just because Talkman's brings me back to like early high school for me because it's just spot on. And I'm like, oh yeah, that aligns with when these games were, or, when this song came out. But yeah, I honestly like Ian Happ's walk-up music. I think his music's really good. All time, Rizzo and the Starlin Castro walk-up music was the best. That was probably my favorite. All-time favorite walk-up, though. I know this isn't a Cubs player. I would agree, though. It's probably Talkman or Happ for me this season. But the best player ever that I've ever seen live in person in terms of walk-up music was Evan Longoria. It was absolutely fantastic. I always have to look up the song. I always end up forgetting the song. And I have to do it. I have to look it up. It's going to kill me if I don't. Evan Longoria walk up. Nope, not walk off. Walk up song. There it is. It's Down and Out by Tantric. So that's your homework assignment if you've never heard that song before. And it's just the opening of the song. And it starts off and it goes dan 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 dun, 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 boosh, and when it hits that big pause and then it kind of drags out, that's when the announcer would come in and he'd be like, now batting number 3, Evan Longoria, and then it would go right back into the dun, 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 dun. It was awesome. It got everybody fired up, and if I was an opposing pitcher, I would not be ready. whatsoever. Jeremiah says the Cubs haven't played well when we've done a watch along. I know. It's tragic. We've only had like one good win on a watch along, and we actually discussed that the other day, and it was the controversial play at the plate in New York. That was the only time we've seen a win on the watch alongs, which is unfortunate because the watch alongs are fun, but yeah, the Cubs don't like playing that well. Ron, Lap, how are you, buddy? How you doing, man? Good to see you here in the comment section. Jeremiah says Charlie Blackman, don't want to lose your love tonight. Oh, that is a good one. That's a fantastic one as well. And then Alap says Tommy Stella had a great one with us as well. I don't remember Tommy's, unfortunately, from when he was a Cub, but yeah, there was some good walk-ups though in those, the 15, 16, 17, 18 teams. A lot of good walk-up songs from all of those guys. Well, everybody, I am going to wrap things up here. This was a fun kind of vent session. I think takeaway from me here is it's not time to panic yet. I largely agree with everybody in the comment section here tonight, but things do need to change. And for starters, it's going to have to change internally because I don't think they're going to go out and make a move just yet. That being said, I think Jed's going to have to get aggressive, and I think they are going to add. I don't know when, but I think it's going to be earlier than we expect. I think it's going to be earlier than the actual deadline, and I would like to see that happen. Maybe it's a lineup switch up like Barron suggests here, batting order, PCA, Talkman, Happ, Suzuki, Bellinger, Morel, and see what happens. Maybe it's something of that nature. Maybe it's just giving some of these young guys in the system a chance, and maybe just saying, hey, these guys are playing for jobs. Let's see what they can do. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe it is like Jed said on Tuesday last week against the Brewers. Maybe it is taking away at bats from some of these proven guys, and telling them, essentially giving them the thing they need to hear without physically hearing it. Of, hey man, you need to keep things going here and see what happens. So we shall see. Cleaning up the comment section, a lot says 19. Oh, yes, that was it. That was a great one. That is a classic song. Yes, absolutely. That was a great one as well. And Hank said, if only the Cubs are having as good a season as you are, Ron. Hey, I appreciate that. We're trying, man. It's been a busy season so far. A busy season for me between Cubs on tap, obviously Four Feathers, Bears on tap. We got a lot going on tap Sportsnet. My own personal endeavors, which for me involve calling games, doing a lot of work right now with the IFL, which has been a lot of fun. The Quad City Steamwheelers, you guys can kind of see the red helmet right here above my shoulder. That's one of their two helmets. The gold one's sitting behind me on the other side here as well. Yeah, man, I wish the Cubs were having just as good of a season as well. And maybe they'll turn it around. We're only 60 games in, a little over 60 now into this thing. Maybe they got a chance. And I don't think it's time to panic just yet. But I think things are going to get better, and we'll have to wait and see. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you, Hank. Keep up the good work, helping us get through a tough stretch. Hey, that's what we're here for. It's what the Cubs on Tap guys are here for, and it's been a fun season so far, despite how things have gone. Final comment here from Alap. Happy in April, very sad in May, starting off sad in June. Come on, Cubs, hold us over until September. I agree. Hold us over until August. Just get me to Hard Knocks with Caleb, and then I'll be mentally set as a sports fan. But we'll see how all of that goes. But as always, ladies and gentlemen, before I get out here, I want to remind you guys, Cubs on Tap, one of two official podcasts here for the On Tap Sports Network covering your Chicago Cubs. Do check out our friends over at the Dingers Podcast. They're live on Mondays around the 8 o'clock hour. You can find that on the On Tap Sportsnet YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, hit the bell button. You know when all of our great shows go live. Follow them at Dinger Cubs. Follow us at Cubbies on Tap on the socials. I am at Loose on Tap as always. Follow the rest of my panelists as well. Joey Knows Nothing, Juice on Tap, Nick _ on Tap, Teddy Freddy 270, and Silent Bob _2. That is our boy Bobby Foster. Bulls, Bears, Blackhawks, you know the drill. We've got it all. Morris, one of our great Bulls writers, and I do a lot on the other two sides with Bears and Blackhawks, and you'll be seeing a lot of me over the summer talking about some off-season stuff with those two teams as well. And as always, Cubs fans, especially this week, you got friends that like the South Siders, so do we. Send them to our friends. They can be friends over at Sox on Tap. OnTapSportsNet.com, at OnTapSportsNet on the socials, the On Tap Sports Network. Go and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. I'm going to get out of there the only way to know how. I like what Darren says here. Fuck them all and go Cubbies. Fuck the Cardinals. Fuck the Brewers. Fuck the Reds too, because why not? And let's go Cubbies.